Hi, everybody. Donna Peeples here. Sorry we're a few minutes late, but we're here and live and in person. And so happy you could join us today for Peoples to People. And I am so honored to have Annette Franz with me. I've been a devout follower of hers for a long time. She's the CEO and founder of CX Journey. I recommend you check it out. And recently, Annette, I was able to pick up on a webinar that you did, and I found it fascinating. And
Awesome.
it was about the 7 deadly sins of CX.
Yes.
So
Yes.
why don't you I mean, where did that idea come from, and how did you think about identifying those 7 sins?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And to the folks who are watching us, apologies for the delay. We have been trying for the last half hour or so to get our audio and video and everything aligned. So we are here now. So thank you for joining us. Great question. So for me, it was really one of those things where, working with clients and figuring out that everybody seems to want to start in the middle or something, and I actually had a call with a potential client the other day, and, he was talking about the things that he was working on. And I was like, okay, but do you have this, and this in place? And he's like, well, no. And I said, well, if you don't have these things in place, then forget about the rest of what you're trying to do, because it's all just really just, motion, it's movement, but it's not progress, and
Right.
So that's really where it came from. And I had seen something about the 7 deadly sins, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly what this is. This is the 7 deadly sins of CX. If you don't have these 7 things in place, if you don't have this foundation, then it's going to fail. And really, that's what deadly sins are. They're mortal sins, right? They're really the origin of all other sins. So
right.
If you commit these, you're.
What are in your order, in your mind, what are the 7?
Okay. Well, I'm going to put number 1 as being executive commitment, or not having executive commitment. If you don't have that, and and by gosh, let me tell you, I've been following you for a long time too, so this is a big one too. If you don't have your executives, if you don't have your CEO on board, forget it. You're not going to get anything done. Again, you're just going to be spinning your wheels, and you're going to have siloed, or you're going to have like little projects going on here that really don't make the big difference that you really want to make. So number 1 is no executive commitment. The other ones, I think there's an order here, but I think the second thing that I would say is that, and even if you read and you see me talk about this on webinars and stuff, I don't necessarily put the other ones in any specific order, but as I've evolved over time, I've kind of said, all right, number 2 really has to be about the culture, and it has to be about outside in thinking and not inside out thinking. And really what that's all about is putting the customer into the customer experience, being people centric, and really bringing the voice of the customer, and bringing the customer into the products and the services that you design. And so I think that would be number 2 is your culture. You've got to have that culture in place. Number 3, you've got to have a vision and a strategy, and that really comes from customer understanding, which is one of the other ones as well. So if you're not grounded or rooted in customer understanding, and which then leads to developing your vision and your strategy, then you're going to fail as well. I guess that's 4. Number 5 would probably be, the employee experience. If employees are an afterthought, then that's definitely a problem. They cannot be an afterthought, and we can talk about this more as we go through this conversation, but the employees are so key to the customer experience. And anybody who doesn't get that yet, it's a problem. Yes, absolutely. Number 6, I would say lack of a governance structure. And you know what? Honestly, I don't even know if I would order them this way, except to say number 1 is executive commitment. Number 6 is lack of a governance structure, because as a customer experience leader, you're not going to be doing all the work, right? You're going to be helping to bring that customer understanding into the organization, but then you've got to get that out into the organization. You've got to have people out there who are going to, I always say this grassroots groundswell. Your employees are going to have to be involved, and they're going to have to do the work and be involved in that change process. And then the last one is really not acting on what you've learned and what you know, right? And you do all this work to understand your customers, but then you do nothing with it. And I think there are so many companies who are stuck in that rut right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, some days I always joke and say, I felt like at times I was swimming in data, and then other days I felt like I was drowning in it and trying to sort through and figure out what's actionable. It's an issue for everybody, and everybody's numbers are the right numbers. It just depends on who you ask. So go into that. And I know one of the things that you're really, really good at is thinking about the overarching design of the customer's experience. And so many times, like you said, it all kind of ties together. We get inside our focus group of one and we think we know best for the customer. So when you're working with a client, how do you kind of take them through the process and think through what is that, connecting all the dots? Because I tell people all the time, I said, here's a news flash. We think in those silos you've mentioned, we think about departments and functions, but the customer always thinks about us as one company. So how do you get people to move on that?
So there's a couple of different things, and I think the ultimate answer here that I like, the tool and the process that I like to use is journey mapping, right? It really is, because it's a collaborative process. It's a visualization. It's a creative process, but it brings people together. You have to have people from the various parts of the organization that are involved in the experience that you're mapping to really understand how they're involved and to share information and to share data and to collaborate. So I really think that journey mapping is the tool and the process that brings the organization together. That's my opinion.
Yeah, well, and your experience too. Obviously, you've led a great many companies through this exercise, and it fascinates me that this whole customer piece is new, when the reality is for every business, the customer has always been at the heart of a successful business. So one of the things that I am totally with you on, and I've seen it so many times work for and against, is you talk about how important the employee experience is. You called it a foundation for what you do moving forward. Talk to me about how and you talked about culture too. So how do you start to instill that in the companies that you're working with?
Okay, so you asked me about 70 questions.
Yeah. Well, I don't get to talk to you as much as I'd like.
I know. And by the way, for those of you watching, we could talk about this stuff all day long.
Absolutely.
So,
An extended webcast.
Exactly. Well, so let me just break that apart. So let me start with the employee experience, and I'll come back to culture, although culture really is sort of the core of it. So in terms of the employee experience, and it's funny because I have clients who come to me and say, hey, Annette, we have this problem with our customers, with our customer experience. And when I first start working with clients, I typically do my own assessment because, like you said, focus group of one, so let's just let's put that aside.
That's right.
And so I go and I do interviews with the executive team, with employees, and with customers. And what I come back with is, oh, by the way, if you fix the problems that you have with your employee experience, you would solve probably 90% of what's going on with the customer experience. And the way that I look at that is really in the definition of what employee experience is, right? It is very similar to the definition of customer experience. It's the sum of all the interactions that an employee has with their employer over the life of the relationship, but it's also the actions and the capabilities or the enablers, the things that they have to do their job. And so the way that I've been talking about it lately is, there's these soft skills or these soft things that have to happen in the employee experience, but then there's also these hard things. And so then both of them are enablers. The soft things or blockers. So the soft things are the usual, right? Like growth and development and feedback and empowered and leadership and communication and knowing that the leaders care and those kinds of things. And those are so important. But what I hear from employees when I do those interviews is the hard stuff. The hard stuff is really what keeps them from delivering the experience that they want to deliver. And they tell me, hey, Annette, I don't have the tools, the resources, the processes in place to serve my customers the way that I need to serve my customers. And those are words coming from the employees. So your employees want to do it. they just don't have the tools, the resources, and the process. So that's the hard stuff, the hard part of the employee experience. And those are the enablers and the blockers. And those are the things that they need to have in order to deliver the experience that customers deserve.
That's, it always fascinated me, our representatives in, for example, the call center, any kind of frontline contact typically are the least trained, and I'm speaking generally here.
Yes.
Some companies do a better job than others, but also are some of the lowest compensated in the company. And it occurred to me one day, I was walking on the call center floor, that, these people are representing the brand as surely as the CEO on an earnings call, but they do it every day. And so, those perceptions are so critical. And I just totally agree with you on the whole employee experience. And speaking to the employees and your customers in any different segment, how important do you think this whole sweeping movement toward digital is in the scheme of things, and trying to, maybe protect yourself against some of the deadly sins without creating some of the problems that can come?
Well, here's the interesting thing is one of the things that I've seen with digital is people tend, I don't want to generalize, but this is what I've seen, is that they tend to look at the digital experience and the digital transformation outside of the customer experience and the customer experience transformation. And really, it's a part of it, right? And so that's how you're going to, that's a new deadly sin right there, is you can't do that.
There's 8.
Yes. Actually, there's more, but yes. I was like, well, that's the original story. The original story is that there's 7, but I know there are more than 7, right? But here's what happens. You said it, customers view your brand as your brand. Mm-hmm. One brand that has, mobile, web, physical, all of these things. They don't view your brand as, oh, well, over here's a website, and over here's a store, and over here's a mobile app. They don't, it's all one to them. And so to look at digital separately from the entire customer experience strategy is a huge fail.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, and I think, pulling those things together is both a challenge because, I was fortunate enough to work with you on your ebook about the emergence of the CX leads. And, what I found is that, everybody owns it and nobody owns it. And it just depends on the circumstance. So I think that's an important thing that you bring to any organization you work with, that, there has to be accountability and ownership, and you have to measure your results. So what do you suggest? Because we could talk all day about navigating the politics of change, inside organizations for sure. But how do you think about getting everybody to the table and having the customer be part of the conversation, whether, a company's deciding to change a process, change the organizational structure, or invest in new technology? All those things. How do you inspire that?
It's key to bring the customer into all of that and to do it with the customer, right? To co-create with the customer. Otherwise, and I always say, what's the purpose of being in business, right? The purpose is to create and to nurture a customer. And if we're going to develop products and we're going to develop services and run a business without bringing the customer in to help us do that, then we're going to fail at some point, right? So I always start with the 3 things that I say are all about customer understanding, right? Listen, characterize, and empathize. So listen is surveys and social media and all those kinds of things, right? Characterize is personas, really understanding who our customers are, what their pain points are, what their problems they're trying to solve, what jobs they're trying to do, all of those things. Those are really critical. Mm-hmm. And then the journey map, the empathize is journey mapping. And so when we have all of those things and we have all of that data, and we've got other data too, we have tons of other data, right? And that comes from all the breadcrumbs that we as customers leave behind when we use the website, when we use the app, when we make purchases, when we call customer service. We have all of this data. Your point about the CX leaders, right, is that person is the person that's going to champion the customer throughout the organization. Now, that person can't be everywhere. Right. So there are things that we can do to bring the customer into the organization and into the decision-making processes and into meetings every day, right? Well, my favorite one is Jeff Bezos and the empty chair, and I have seen clients adopt this, and they do fun things with the chair. They paint it, they put a bear on it, they put their personas on it, those kinds of things. Whatever it is to have the customer right there, customer room. customer room is an awesome way. I call it a customer shrine because you walk it. Yes,
I like that.
You walk into the room and it's all about the customer. It's your personas. It's the listening that you've done. It's the journey maps. It's a way for employees to see and think about the customer every single day. Streaming those feedbacks and the data and the journey maps and all of that on your monitor. Every office has monitors throughout, keep it flowing and sharing it throughout. Having personas and cutouts of real customers with their feedback, their verbatims throughout the office. There is a fun, here in Southern California, it used to be the headquarters or an office for Stanley Black & Decker. And they had this fun thing where they had throughout their offices, they had footprints. So actually walking in your customer's shoes. And so it was footprints along the hallway. And then up on the wall was what it led to was some feedback from a customer or some customer persona or something. But it was really cool because you walked through the halls of the offices and the customer was there always.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to bring, but and as the CX team or as the governance, the CX champions throughout the organization, their roles are to sit in meetings and always make sure that as decisions are made, conversations are had, that the customer is always brought into that and always their voice is always brought into everything we do. So there are a lot of different ways to do that, but it's so key to keep that momentum going. And, years ago I worked for Fidelity and the president, whenever he did his quarterly town halls, he would always start off with stories about the customer and stories about the employees. So again, it is really also incumbent on the executives to keep those stories flowing in their meetings as well.
Yeah. Challenges. There's 10,000 other things that are pulling on the employees and the leadership. So, continuing to make that a priority, I think is a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's why we're in business, right?
Yeah.
I saw a funny quote the other day. It was, because the flip side of the purpose of a business is to create and nurture a customer is the purpose of a business is to maximize shareholder value. And the interview that I saw, the video I saw, the gentleman who was speaking was like, yes, because what motivates people is to say, hey, let's go to work today to make rich people richer. And that's what maximizing shareholder value is all about. I love that.
That's great. That's great. Well, Annette, you were talking about personas and, all customers are not created equal, but, I come from a space where there was very simplistic segmentation. It might be consumer, commercial, industrial, just these big, broad categories. But now, it's getting harder and harder to put people in categories because we're talking about people here. And so, instead of having a mass market, it's almost become a market of mass niches, right?
Right. Yes.
So the challenge is, how do you satisfy everybody all the time? And then beyond that, I know, we've talked before about, omni-channel, multi-channel, and that, horse has been beaten to death. And, it's been an aspirational kind of conversation, but now because everybody wants everything they want when they want it, thanks to the likes of Amazon and Netflix. And, we've been trained to expect that. But with some of the organizations I know that I've worked for and that you work with, that's not an easy thing to accomplish. So, thinking about being, and I like to say, it's not enough to be always on anymore. Everybody had a website, but if you can't accomplish anything, how are you on demand as one of these enterprise businesses, a lot of which are very highly regulated, that there's more and more. And I want to hear what you have to say about the trade-off between our personal information and the ability to get what we want when we want it.
Right.
But how do you think about this whole omni-channel, multi-channel, and the expectations and the customers in control?
Yeah. So there's an interesting, you just made an interesting point there. The customer is in control. So my last Forbes article was about, do customers really want to be in control? And I don't think so. So I'm gonna address that first. Okay. Again, you said like 70 things.
Perfect.
In response to this.
I'm trying to wring as much out of you as I can while I've got you.
So in that article, I talk about, do customers really want to be in control? And I don't think so. I think because if you think about it, and this goes back to sort of the data and the personas and all that. If customers want experiences that are personalized, that are relevant, that are convenient, that are simple, that are effortless, you name it, the list goes on, but it's, but when we say that customers are in control or want control, that's not simple. That's not effortless. That's not convenient. That says that the customer is telling us how to do things and is pointing the fingers and all of that. I think a better way to say it is that they want a participative role in the experience, right? They don't want to be in control. They don't want to tell you what to do. Yes, we will happily provide feedback. We will happily provide feedback because we want you to survive. We love doing business with you, or we have to do business with you. So we're going to provide feedback and we want you to continue. We want you to continue to succeed, but we don't want to be in control. So it's really more of a participative kind of thing, so that when it's that, then it becomes something that's a little bit more effortless and simple. And we choose to do that because we want to do that. Being in control feels like, we have to do that because you've made a mess of this situation and we have to do this, So that's my view on putting the customer in control.
Yeah, I think that's interesting.
Thank you. Okay, so what else was there? And I'm still going back to the first time that you asked me 70 questions, which was about, you had culture in there too. So omni-channel. So the omni-channel and that experience is really about two important things, right? Technology and data. And you mentioned it. There's regulation. There's all of these kinds of things that limit. There's legacy technology. Oh. There's all of these things that really and with mergers and acquisitions, there's a ton of different disparate systems that need to be tied together. So really that's going to be the key, is to be able to simplify that and centralize that and have sort of, and it's going to be years before a lot of these companies can ever get to a place where they've replaced all of that legacy technology. In the meantime, they've got to figure out how to bring all of the data together, everything that they know about every single customer, and in such a way that they can then use it to personalize the experience. So, and the thing about personas too, excuse me, the thing about personas too is that, to your point, in the past we talked about segments and markets and all those things, and that's like way too high level to design an experience. But if we focus on the personas and we get down to the level of these different personas that have different, each persona is going to have different needs, pain points, jobs to do, problems to solve. That's sort of the heart of the CX design persona, the CX persona. So that gets us to a place where we can design the experience at a more personalized level, not at the segment level, but at a more personalized level. Sure. And then taking that data that we have on each individual customer, like I just talked about, and bringing it in to further then hone that experience to be more personalized to that individual. So it's really about data and technology and how we use that to facilitate the experience that customers want to have.
Wonderful. Well, we're living in this world where, you could argue that technology is moving faster than ever, and it's only going to accelerate. I don't know. We used to do 5-year planning. I don't even know what 5 years looks like now, but in the midst of all that, we have some new technologies that have come into play and designed in a lot of ways to better serve the customer or be more predictive and proactive or on demand, like we talked about. So how are you thinking about this future world? What does the future of not only work for employees that are dealing with customers look like? But there's a lot of talk about AI. There's a lot of talk about Internet of Things. There's, all these things going on that are surely going to impact businesses and the customer. How are you thinking, and how are you kind of looking forward at those developments?
So two things. First one is, and I'll put this one on the shelf for a second, is about CX and the CX view on like a CX team's view on that. I'll come back to that in just a second. But the other part of it is it's inevitable, right? It's happening. It's already happening. And if you're not already doing it, if you're not already using it, you're already behind the times, right? To your point, 5-year planning, what's that? It's like,
I'm just worried about tomorrow.
I know, right? We can barely cover that, So it is, and that actually leads to my point about the CX work. And I had worked in the past for a predictive prescriptive analytics firm. And when we went and talked to the CX folks about this, what it does and what it can do and what it can do for you to simplify as a CX professional, your job, but then, think about what it can do for your customers. It was just blank stares, and it was, oh no, I have my spreadsheets and my quad charts and my, NPS, and I have this. And it's like, we have to get out of that mindset. We have to, stop, getting in our own way, because it's, like I said, it's here and we need to use it, and it makes us more efficient. It makes us do our jobs in a way that ultimately leads to a better experience for the customer. So yeah, ultimately my view is it's here. We need to just figure out, I think, going back to your point about how it's not creepy and how it's not, there's some boundaries that, and I know just in the last week or so, something came out about the echo and how conversations are, listened to, and yeah, exactly. And we've all had some of those weird experiences. My experience was I was on my iPhone, and I was having a conversation with a client about the shoes that she had on and where she bought them, and those exact same shoes with an ad from Nordstrom, which is where she bought them, showed up on my Instagram feed later that day. And so, stuff like that, but are we okay with that? That's your point about sharing data, and how much of it will we give up and how much will we allow them to listen so that we can have that experience. I don't mind giving my data. I do mind being listened to. I don't want to be listened to. So,
do you think it's because I consider myself a little bit of an expert on millennials because I gave birth to two, and so I'm wondering, because I look at my parents. My parents are much less willing than I am to give up information, and my children are just like living large out there, but I am seeing the trend toward my mom. My mom and dad are retired, and my mother is out there on social. She's got an opinion about everything. So I'm just wondering, what are you seeing out there? Is there this generational divide, or are we all? Because if we want to talk to our grandchildren or our relatives, we've got to learn how to text. My girls don't answer the phone. So
exactly.
So how do you think about those kind of divides and how to bridge them?
Yeah, well, I think we need to introduce your mom to my mom, because it's the same thing, right?
We'll do that.
She has an opinion that she shares on Facebook. I remember when she first joined Facebook, and as a matter of fact, I wonder if she's watching, because she actually, when I shared this on Facebook this morning, hi Mom, if you are. I remember when my mom first joined Facebook a couple of years ago, I was like, oh my gosh, everybody behave. My mom's on Facebook now. So, but yes. And I have two teenagers, so I've got two Gen Z. So I see both ends of that spectrum as well. And it's completely different. It is. And so again, when we go back to developing our personas, and we're using the data to really, and we, this is why customer understanding is the cornerstone of customer centricity, right? We have to use that data to really understand our customers so we can deliver the experience that they expect, So, so I think that's at the root of it.
Well, absolutely. And Annette, I am so sad to say we are at the end of our time today. We've gone a little bit over, but we do want to talk again to you.
Absolutely.
Such a wealth of information, always insightful and delightful. Annette, and I wanted to invite everybody to go to your website at cxjourney.com. It's been a great resource for me as I've navigated the treacherous waters of the customer experience. And then also invite everybody to your Twitter. Once a week, you do CX chat, and I think it's fascinating to watch and listen and hopefully participate and share some insights. It's just a great forum with some influencers like yourself. So it's
thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
I appreciate you bringing that up. It's at 11 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesday. So just follow the CX chat hashtag. And yeah, absolutely. The more we share, the more that we talk to each other and help each other. And I think that's one of the things about CX professionals is that we are all sort of in this together, and we want to help each other out. So thank you so much for having me. And yes, I'm a fan of yours. So thank you for all that you do. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me today.
You're welcome. And today's People to People was brought to you by Pipestream Digital Labs. And don't forget, visit us on pipestream.com. We are the leading provider of conversational AI to the enterprise world. So thanks so much. And Annette, always good to see you.
Thank you.